Hey, welcome to my live stream. This is the Chinese Medicine Podcast. I just did one a second ago and I didn't even know it was actually on. So let me see if I can see people's question and answers. How does that work? This is the first time I've done this, so please bear with me. I'm trying to work it out. But this is the Chinese Medicine Podcast, the place where you can come to learn about Chinese medicine, have your questions answered, talk about Chinese medicine. And I've just gotten a new computer. I'm super excited about it. And I've just worked out how to be able to use my Canon camera, the one I'm filming on now, you can see me in now, to do some live. So I hope you can hear me properly. I'm just going to check that audio is working. 1, 2, yeah, it seems to be working. Good. So this is the time where you can ask your questions, pop your questions in the comments. I'm not sure what's a good time to do these streams either, because I don't know where people are in the world that are logging on the most in terms of, what's a good time. So let me know in the comments what's a good time slot for that. But I thought we'd talk a bit about Chinese medicine for like how to work things out for yourself. It's one of the things I really want to talk about, because there's a way to kind of think about things, and like you don't have to become a practitioner. I'm just going to adjust something here because it doesn't look that great. Just going to adjust this light, and I hope that I can hear. I hope I can see here. I hope I can see people's comments. So I'm going to log on as well. There we go. So please put your comments. Let me know in comments firstly if you can hear me. If you're watching there, here we go. I can see the chat now. Comments. There we go. Can you hear me properly? I think you can, because I just heard myself. So what I wanted to talk about is one thing that I see a lot of people comment on the channel about asking questions, which is great because I love the questions, is like, is this food good for me? Is that food good for me? For dampness, like, what about this? What about that? And so something that I probably make another video on this just to talk about it as well, but something that you need to think about with Chinese medicine is it's an ancient system of Chinese medicine, right? So the way I'm answering these questions, like people ask me things like, what about almond milk? What about like flour made out of, I don't know, things that they just didn't have in the Han Dynasty, right? Which is where the formulations and the ideas of Chinese medicine have come from. Now it's moved on since then. It's not like that's all we have and that's all the knowledge we have to rely on. But really a proper understanding of Chinese medicine is more based on Han Dynasty practices and Han Dynasty ideas of Chinese medicine, rather than it being about modern interpretations, I guess, in that way. But what I'm getting at is I'm trying to make a modern interpretation using those principles. And that's why sometimes that's why you won't find it in books, because just no one's talking about that in textbooks so much. But there is a way to work it out for yourself, let's say. Now, a lot of people ask about dampness because it's such a common diagnosis, and that's one of the reasons why I was making a lot of these videos on the channel about dampness. I'm just going to check in every so often, see if there's any comments or whatever. Not sure. This is more just like a little test stream. So if you're watching along, put a thumbs up in the comments so I know the comment section is working, because I don't know. Or put something in there, put a smiley face, put a thumbs down. I don't care, put something in there. So with dampness, let's say, is something dampening, right? Is blah, blah, blah food dampening? How are you going to work that out for yourself? Because that's really what you want to be able to do. You want to be educated enough, like as a practitioner, that's what a practitioner should be doing. But even as a layperson or a student or just a keen person interested, you could work that out for yourself. So the biggest aspect of whether something's impacting your health or not is on either your digestion, right? And so how do we understand your digestion in Chinese medicine? The main way is your bowels. So have your bowels drastically changed? And I've been talking about this with a few patients recently, something like saying, well, look, if everything's exactly the same, like let's say in a perfect circumstance, And maybe if you're going through a difficult time where you're trying to deal with different food allergies or food things, then like you will be very specific about what foods you can and can't have, right? So you won't be eating a variety of changes all the time. Let's just put it like that. So let's say your bowels change. Well, you could either backtrack and think, what did I have? So this is a way of thinking about this might be keeping a food diary. Some people who are like really trying to discover what foods are irritating them, they might keep a food diary. So you just jot down what you have every day as roughly as you can. Awesome. I can see a comment there. So thanks, Teacup. I know the comment section's working. So this is good. This is good. And Forest of Woo and Rayleigh, I suffer from a bad tremor since 1 year. I'll come back to your question in a sec. I'll just answer this real quick. I'll just talk about this. I'll finish this topic. I'm very good at changing over topics and sometimes not even finishing a conversation that I've had with someone. So I'll finish this idea. But yes, please, guys, put your comments and put your questions in the comments below in the description. So what you want to do is think, how did that impact me? So dampness tends to typically make your bowels become looser, right? They'll become less formed. And this is why people who have dampness or spleen chi deficiency already are very super sensitive to their foods, right? So they eat like even sometimes just a little bit of something that's irritating or cold, like a little bit of raw fruit or a little bit of this or that. So that's one thing to think of, is if you're thinking about this food. So you think about nut milk was a recent question I had on the channel. The second thing is, what is the source of that food made out of? Like if it's, let's say it's nut milk or it's flour or something like that, and then you're essentially concentrating it up because you're most of the time you're having more than you normally would. So let's say how many almonds goes into almond milk, right? Would that be natural for you to just consume that many almonds? Almond milk is a little bit different to something like almond butter, right? So almond butter is super duper concentrated amount of almonds. So if you got, I don't know, really snacky and you just started eating one of those jars of almond butter and you ate the whole thing, that would cause a huge amount of detriment to you, much more than should you have chugged down a bottle of almond milk, let's say, or you had 3 almond milk coffees that day. So that one is watering it down a little bit and the other one's kind of concentrating it up. So that's just one way to think about it. It just makes it sort of empowers you to kind of think about, what is this food doing and is that detrimental to me or not? And everyone's also different, right? So a food does have an effect no matter who takes it, right? But then you can modify the effects of that food by if it's cooked. So if something's a bit more detrimental, a bit more dampening, and you cook it, it'll automatically become less dampening than having something that's raw. It'll automatically become more easily digestible. Basically, that's what cooking does, any kind of cooking process. Now, if you cook it in fat and you fry something, that's certainly going to make it more dampening. But in general, cooking like methods where you're using water, you're boiling, you're sauteing, or you're just putting a tiny bit of oil, like, when you saute something, you generally boil it first and then maybe cook it like almost like a stir fry, but not with a bit of less oil. Those cooking methods tend to be much more easier to digest for you, and they're not as dampening at all. Yeah. All right, let's have a look at this question. So Rayleigh says, I suffer from a bad tremor since 1 year ago. Changed my diet 8 months ago, animal proteins and cooked foods, but I still have symptoms. Do you know how long my symptoms will get sorted for good? Many thanks. So it's not my intention to hide information from people on this channel. Like, it's not my intention to try to make things more cryptic, or you've got to go pay money to see a practitioner because it's about the money or anything. But there is a due diligence that needs to be done, and certainly on the internet, I'm a person who's a registered practitioner, so I have a kind of higher duty of care, I guess, in a way, or ethical responsibility than just a random person. Maybe that's why people do watch my channel. Just a random person that dispenses advice could possibly give out more advice without, they wouldn't care much at all that there might be repercussions from that. So it's very hard to give advice like this for such a small amount of information. part of the reason why I made this channel is to show people what a practitioner does. So you kind of get an idea of like what the value for money of what you're paying for in one way, and also the value of what Chinese medicine can provide as a lifestyle thing and as a healthcare system. So we can talk about what tremors might be caused by in Chinese medicine. I can certainly talk about that. I can certainly talk about, he or she says, I changed my diet 8 months ago, and like, I'm assuming you're saying you do eat animal protein and cooked foods. So look, some things take a long time to fix. But as you're making those healthy changes, right? So let's say you've made those healthy changes in your diet, you want to think about, in general, even though the main symptom that you wanted to solve or fix or resolve hasn't changed, maybe let's say dramatically, or shifted much, have other symptoms in your body that you may or may not have even noticed. Have those things gotten better? So if you're going to use diet therapy, let's say, as a treatment methodology, it's a very long process. So it's more something that's about prevention, and preventing getting tremors, let's say, preventing getting sick, preventing these kind of things, or extending your life. So in Chinese medicine, they have this thing called yang shen, which means like prolonging life, or conserving life, or preserving life. So unfortunately, like, it's not like, oh, you can just eat a carrot and your eyesight returns or something like that. Like, that's just a ridiculous thing. And people who say that stuff are just nutters, like people on the internet that say, oh, these 5 foods or this one weird trick fixed my blah, blah, blah. It doesn't work like that. Like, sometimes these health problems take a long time to be caused, to happen, right? And tremors tend to be, basically, we can think of them in a couple of ways. One is there's too much movement. So wood is the movement of our body. Wood is the generation of movement. But with a tremor, you've got too much movement and your body can't control that movement. So what should be controlling wood? So you could think about it in the 5 element cycle. So you have wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. And the opposite ones of those things, I wish I could superimpose my little 5 element thing here, but I can't. So let's say you have wood over here, fire, earth, metal, water, right? So metal should control wood. And what does that mean? It means, well, keep it in balance, like keep it in, like, it doesn't mean stop wood from working, but if wood is unrestrained, it sometimes needs that restraint. And so it could be a lack of metal able to, and how would you get that? Well, because maybe metal got deficient. So what's the metal element about? Metal element's your lungs, metal element's your large intestine. So a practitioner might look at that, right? And you might say, well, there's nothing wrong with my lungs, Marie. There's nothing wrong with my bowels or my large intestine. So it could go even further than that in the 5 elements. It could be like something's not, like, you have also generating, so water generates wood. And wood, fire, earth generates earth generates metal. So it could be a lack of earth to generate metal, and then not enough metal to control the wood. And then we think also, like, as in aging, like when you age, you're losing 2 things. You're losing yang, which is the functional aspect of your body, right? So the ability to do its job, to function. So the structure's still there, right? Your physical body is still there, right? When you die, your physical structure is what remains. That's all the yin. And it takes a long time for that yin to kind of dissipate and decay, right? You don't just poof disappear, because we're not all spirit, we're not all yang. But that's what yang is. Yang is the function. So like when you go to a GP, a doctor or something, and they say, hi Barlin, happy Chinese New Year, happy Lunar New Year, everybody. Almost forgot. Been getting so excited about my new computer. I'll turn it around so you can have a quick look. There you go. There's me. I've got this new awesome U-Butte M Canon. I won't lift it up because everything might stop working. All my things are plugged into it. I got this new Apple Mac with the M1 chip. I've got upgraded from what you can see behind me, that computer there, 2009 Apple computer. That's what I was using to do all my editing and everything. And this camera here that I'm using now is a Canon M50. So this is great. I was able to hook this Canon camera up to do my live stream. And I've just been so excited about doing this and getting on with some stuff for my business and stuff, but I forgot all about Chinese New Year today. So Gung Si Fa Cai, everybody. Yeah, so what were we saying about the tremors? So if you're still there, you can just put a thumbs up or something. Rayleigh, or if people are interested in a different question, you can put your question below. So blood should be part of the wood, right? So the wood element has two aspects. One is blood, and one is the chi. So I was getting at this idea from the yang, right? So what happens is as we age, the yang declines, which is the function. So that physical structure is there. So let's say this was the thing that was in my mind a second ago, was like, if you go to the GP and they say we've given you a liver function test, right, and your liver's not working as well as it should be, or you've got some disease of your liver, let's say, or some disease of your kidney, like the structure's still there. The kidney itself is still there. Now, sometimes the structure physically might be impaired, like there might be a blockage there or something like that. But why is it not working as it should be? Like the actual structure is there. It's the function, right? It's the yang. And this is the message that the cells are giving to each other to do their jobs. That's the yang of the body. That's the beauty of our body. Still now there's lots of things in Western medicine they still can't say exactly how they know they happen. But that's the kind of, if there was a mystical part of our body, that would be it, right? The yang is how are these messages just how is this intrinsic relationship between everything just happening, right? Your nervous system that just kind of functions without you. You don't have to tell your body to breathe, let's say, and consciousness and all these kinds of things. So essentially what happens is as we age, we're losing that yang, and what is left is yin. And so with something like tremors, what can happen is, it's because tremors is a wood element, often a wood element aspect problem. The yang kind of, or the blood of the wood can't hold onto the yang, let's say. Now, if this is getting a bit beyond you and you're thinking, oh, I'm ready to click off, Marie, this is a bit mental, or this is sounding a bit strong or difficult, well, that's because Chinese medicine is difficult. It's very hard to understand some aspects of Chinese medicine unless you think about it. Now, a lot of it just makes sense, which is what I love about it. And a lot of people on this channel, when I give them the answers to their questions, they're like, oh, that makes sense. And I'm like, yes, it does. It does make sense, because Chinese medicine's observational. But then there are these things where it takes almost like a leap of faith to kind of get into that headspace to kind of allow yourself to think like that. But when you do think like that, to me, it's just natural. When I think of, why wouldn't blood be related to wood? Wouldn't everyone know that? Anyway, maybe you can pop, oh, it's awesome, great, teacup. But I think that's because you're a student of Chinese medicine as well. So what I want to know is from you guys that are here now, I also just started a Twitch account. Another thing. Would that be useful to be on Twitch to do this? To do Chinese medicine live streams on Twitch? Oh, you're not a student. I just thought you always ask very deep and meaningful questions. I thought you were studying Chinese medicine. Wow. Okay, well, that's a compliment to you. So yeah, all right. So Balin says, are you knowledgeable about the Chinese horoscope? Oh, the different effects on the body. No. Just to put it simply, I could make something up for you, but I don't do that on. Yeah, I don't do that at all. So I can tell you a person who's very knowledgeable about it. In one aspect. So there is a part of Chinese medicine called Wulin Qi, which is the prediction of the weather patterns and cycles and things like that. And a guy who's very familiar with that and teaches on that is Tyler Rowe, and he's in Melbourne. It's something where you have to really study it. Now, people within that frame of study can also get, some people in that frame, not Tyler, but some people go into the mystical side of things. They start sort of predicting your fortune, sort of thing like that. Now, that's not what actually that system is meant to be. So you might have seen things, people talk about stems and branches. And it does predict the types of the pestilence chi, let's say we call it, that could prevail, what's the weather because weather changes, right? And it's the people have been predicting this and looking at this for centuries, not just since we've had modern technology to kind of be able to do this. So no, I don't. It is cool though to kind of talk about the horoscopes in the year of, but I can talk a little bit about the year of the ox. Well, oxes are ploughing, right? And they are the workhorse kind of animal. So the things I've read about Chinese New Year for this year that kind of resonate with, like, they make sense to me, that I think, just to sum it up, would be, you know, thinking things like, hey, it's about, you know, keeping, like, sort of steadying the ground, right, and keeping ploughing that and that workforce that's needed to be done, right, in your life, right? So, you know, and obviously different horoscope animals have different, you know, the each year means something different to them. But yeah, I'm not familiar with this stuff. Sorry, would have made an interesting topic to talk about. I just kind of think in myself, you make your own luck. You make your own. It doesn't have to be the year of the ox for me to get lucky, or whatever year it is. So I tend to not get into that stuff too much. But it's certainly like the seasonal, we could call it, like Yulin Chi talks about seasonal chi and pestilence chi and things like that. And that does make a difference to your body, like physically what kind of year it is. You know, like we know, I mean, look, let's not talk about last year too much, although it's kind of bleeding into this year. On one hand, you could say, well, the pestilence chi is causing something, right? Which is the environment, like there's an actual virus that's causing disease and issues with people. But then there's also, well, just the culture of what's happening around you. Now, that's not really the Wulin Chi is not kind of predicting that, like what's people's response to it. But that also can have an effect on you. And some people are more susceptible to that than others. One of the things I'm really into is like personality types, like psychology personality types. Because I see it a lot in the clinic, right? Like a lot of patients, like why do patients react differently to the same circumstances, let's say? Like I have some patients that get cancer and they just kind of like, they just maintain a positive attitude, and they're really, you know, they take it like, I mean, you don't see everything as a practitioner, especially as an acupuncturist, like, or a herbalist. You don't see everything that people are going through. So I'm not sort of trying to say, oh, they're just taking it on the chin and they're just, you know, going through that. But then I see other people with a far worse disease, let's say, and it's like the end of the world. It's just the ruining their life, or it's also taking over their life. And part of that is like your personality type and how you respond to circumstances, how you respond to what's happening to you. And part of the reason why I did that series on this channel a few months ago, which was the Chinese medicine types, like the 5 element types. So let's say if you follow Myers-Briggs, there's 16 personality types there. Well, there's 5 personality types, let's say, in Chinese medicine, if you want to be specific about it. But then within each one, like wood, you could have wood excess and wood deficient, and then you could have wood imbalance. So technically there's about 15, right, which kind of is roughly similar to 16 kind of types, let's say. I'm not saying that each one of those wood, fire, earth relates to a specific Myers-Briggs one, but that's something I'd be interested in to know. I'm sort of started doing a little bit of side research project on that, just asking people what their types are and sort of seeing if there's a correlation there, because it's just kind of interesting to me. But look, those things make a difference on how you react. And so to answer your question a little bit more, Balin, about the horoscope, you know, the year, like, I think every year that happens, there's a chi of that year, let's say. There's a vibe of that year. Whether that be physically because of the environment, and whether we react to that physical environment and then that creates a culture, or vice versa. Like there's a culture and we just simply react into that culture, and it's got nothing to do with whether it's hotter or cooler. But certainly some types of people, they respond better to different types of weather, you know, and where people live geographically and what they can and can't do, right? Physically. And I mean, last year was a good example of restrictions being imposed on people, that they weren't expecting, right? Like even for me, like I was like, oh, what? I can't travel as much as I'd like to, and what does that effect have on you when you're used to doing something all the time, and then suddenly you can't do that? Like it is, all these things are having a psychological effect, and then that psychological effect can have a physiological effect if we allow it to kind of do that, or if we don't keep the mental stuff of that in check. Let me just read this other. Should Western countries adopt Chinese medicine and feng shui in maintaining health and preventing people? Of course, I think preventing and reducing illness in people. Look, I'm obviously biased in one way of saying yes, of course. Whether they will or not is another question. Like this is going to open a big door. I might need to have a glass of wine to answer your question here. So let's talk about this question then. So there's a couple of issues. One is, would people do that? Would governments want to do that? I think on one hand, you got to think the big pharma issue, right? We've seen that already a lot this last year and this year in controlling things, right? One thing that's a bit of a bummer about Chinese medicine being utilised more, I think, in our societies, in our Western cultures. So I'm from Australia. You can probably tell by my Aussie accent. Is that there's very little, like there's not a tiny amount because there's plenty of research. But there's, in the grand scheme of things, there's very little research. One that doesn't come from China, and we can talk about why there's such a big bias against that. But even in in Australia, people just tend to not want to accept that research or accept it as valid. Like they don't hold it in a higher esteem as other kinds of research, right? And I think that's a little bit. I actually think it's racist in one way because I've been told by our professional bodies like AHPRA, the Australian Health Regulation Authority, that to advertise Chinese medicine, we need sufficient evidence, right? And they've said any research from China isn't sufficient evidence. And that's a very blanket, almost to me, a racist statement. Like, why would you say it like that? But they're saying, well, we can't trust that evidence, right? Well, that's also a very blanket statement. All evidence from China is untrustworthy. But it does open the door that that's a real thing. Like there is a mistrust of stuff, right? In China now, thank goodness the medicine I practice is from the Han Dynasty and not China now. Because I wouldn't be practicing what they're giving people in China now. That's not what I practice in Chinese medicine. It's not a snapshot of medicine in China right now. It's what was intended to be practiced now, but it's not practiced now. I'll tell you now. Anyway, well, some people still in China practice, classical or Han Dynasty or pretty good Chinese medicine, quality Chinese medicine. But there's a lot of mixing up of herbs and drugs, and there's a lot of issues in that way with how doctors are paid in China and kickbacks and all this kind of stuff. So your question is, should Western countries adopt Chinese medicine feng shui? I'm not sure about feng shui to maintain health, like whether that would ever be considered. Certainly, I think people could learn something from feng shui, just average. Maybe there's a few things I could do on this channel about that, because there's a lot of common sense, right? When I first was studying Chinese medicine, back in a long time ago, 2000 I was studying 1997. I was studying it. Just by the way, if this stream just drops out, it's because my camera's battery is going to die. It's not going to die now, but I don't know how long it will last for because I've not done this before. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, feel free to put your comments and your questions in the comments, guys. I'll just be chatting away for a little bit. I can't remember what I was saying. Put your questions in the comments. The issue is why people... Oh, feng shui, yes, right. I remember when I was first studying it. And, people used to think, it's going to be woo-woo. Like people who were outside of Chinese medicine, just my friends, my family. Because I didn't know. And they just thought it was going to be some mystical hocus pocus. And some of it's because of how that information is just presented, and some of it's also because of how like a lack of understanding to translate things properly, and so it just comes across like that. And some of it's practitioners actually just play on it because they think people want it to be sounding mystical or seeming mystical, I think. So for Western countries to kind of adopt that stuff, it has to be a bit more straightforward. A really good example would probably be, look at how Western countries have adopted mindfulness versus yoga practices, let's say. Now, there's some things within yoga that are very similar, almost exactly the same as mindfulness. But as soon as you say the word yoga, it brings up all these other ideas for people. And it's also such an old concept that there's so many different things associated with it. And that's the same for Chinese medicine. Like, it's so broad. Maybe not feng shui, but people just don't understand what it is. Is it someone coming out with a pendulum and, seeking out the spirits? Is it thinking about north, south, east and west? Is it about lucky? It's about, where I can bring things to keep the lucky. Like, part of that luck of feng shui is, well, it's lucky if you don't get sick, right? So I remember reading a little feng shui book, and it was saying, like, it's bad luck to live near a hospital, and they also say it's bad luck to live near the casino, right? Because the luck's kind of flowing right out of these areas. Well, of course, now we know, because people are super aware because of the old CV. You wouldn't want to live near a hospital. If there's a pandemic going on, there's all people dying and sick everywhere around that area. Well, that pestilence chi, or that negative energy, is literally, you might be breathing it more around that area, especially in the times when they didn't have PPE, they didn't have, people didn't have the ability to stay home and be sick. They just went to the hospital because they had, they didn't have anyone to care for them at home, let's say. So those things are just common sense. Like, the other thing about feng shui that's really important is, like, where you sit. So, like, let's say there's a door behind me here, right? It's not good feng shui for me to have my back to the door. Why is that? Because if someone comes in, now I can see them because I got a camera here. Now there's no one here. But if there was, then I might go, oh, and I'd be startled, and that would hurt my heart, or would damage my chi. So that's, I know this is common sense. Bad luck living next to a cemetery. Yeah, exactly. So that kind of thing, the bad luck thing, and the where you put your bed is important, and where you have to have your window open, because the number one way you can get sick in Chinese medicine is the wind and the cold. So particularly the cold, or you think of the wind brings the cold in. So typically what would happen is you'll have the window open, you'll go to sleep, it might be hot and you're sweating, and then the in the nighttime you wake up and you've got a stiff neck to one side because of the wind and the cold. So look, this stream was really just to test that it can work, and I'm so glad that it does. If anyone's got another question, you can ask it quickly, or ask it now, because I'm going to shut this stream down in a minute. But yeah, I hope you're doing well. Hope you're having a good weekend. And we'll chat if there's other things people want to chat about. There's so many questions on the channel that I need to answer, so I'm sorry I haven't done that for a while. But now we can do the streams, and so I might start up a Twitch. I hope that I could do both simultaneously. That would be my dream, to just stream to everything at once. And we'll see whether I can do that. But now I've learned how to use this program that lets me stream from my camera, so it's super nice. Audio quality is pretty good. Hopefully you can hear me all good. Yeah. So yeah, anyone else got any questions, and then we'll probably close up. Okay, if I had chocolate strawberries for Valentine's Day, I love this question. Just haven't read it yet, but just the opening line. What's the best counterbalance to get my body back in balance? Yeah, so look, a really good antidote to chocolate coated strawberries. a really good thing to remember is Chinese medicine is one of the systems of medicine, if the only system, that's mostly about balance. So they never say one thing's bad or something's too super, like it's completely out. It's completely out of the question. Now, if you eat a lot of, if you eat this every day, a lot of chocolate, let's say you have a block of chocolate a day, and then you're going to add a box of chocolate-coated strawberries, well, yeah, you're going to feel sick and you're going to have a lot of dampness. But actually, the combination of those two isn't so bad. One of the things you can think of with fruits is the enzymes in fruits help you break down fats. So one of my Chinese medicine teachers once told me, goes, Marie, if you're ever going to have hot chips, always have an apple after the hot chips, because it breaks down. Now, I don't do that. I'm certainly, after I eat a bag of, you go to the beach and you have one of those packets of hot chips or whatever, you don't go, oh, well, I really feel like an apple now. But I think you want to think about, what do you don't necessarily have to counterbalance that. Like, it's a treat. If it's a treat, enjoy it. Like, just have a treat. It's okay. You're not going to kill yourself with some chocolate coated strawberries, and hopefully you've got someone nice to eat them with. And that's even better, because it's Chinese medicine's about your whole health, your mental health, physical health, your spiritual health, like these things all in balance. And food is a big part of like social life, yeah. And it becomes out of balance when people go and they eat burgers all the time, or they eat takeaways all the time, and then they also go out and eat that stuff as well, and then they also their default diet. So if you're worried about you've had a bit of naughty time too much, or a bit of been off the wagon, let's say, or whatever, too much, and having a lot of fatty foods or rich and chocolatey foods, or you're really craving the sweet, then the clear bland diet is kind of the solution to that. So just having soups, clear soups and stuff. But you can't think about it like, well, I had a punnet of strawberries coated in chocolate, so now I have to eat something to balance it out. I don't think you want to think like that. Like, that's not a healthy way to kind of think in Chinese medicine. Like, it's not necessary, is what I'm saying. Like, you've had it, and it shouldn't cause you too much detriment. I mean, if you had a really weak spleen qi and you have raw foods, yeah, okay, maybe having the raw strawberries might do that. But berries are one of the few fruits that tend to be okay for people who have got like they can have a bit of berries and not have too much detriment in their digestion, especially like blueberries and blackberries. And so anything red is good for your heart and blood, right? Tonifying blood in your heart. So, I mean, in Western science, I think of berries as like just full of antioxidants. That's their main goodness thing that they have, main thing that they do. Yeah. So thanks so much for your questions and stuff, guys, and joining into the stream. This is awesome. So good. So now I know the camera battery's lasted this long, so that's good. I know how long I can do this for. And I'll probably try to do this once a week if I can. And I'll probably start up a Twitch account, and you might see that in the comments somewhere below. So I hope you're all doing well, and if you're watching this after the fact, you're thinking, oh, I missed it and I want to put a comment in, well, put the comments below in the comments, and I'll have a look at those ones for next time. So I hope you're doing well and have a great weekend, whatever you're doing, and yeah, I'll see you again next time.